Peace Now. My name is Trudy Quaife. I'm a member of Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace. We're a local organization of friends and neighbors, and we've been advocating for peace and justice for 15 years. I'm your host today, and I'm joined by Dan Wilcox. Thanks for being here, Dan.
Oh, glad to be here, Trudy. Thank you.
Dan is a local activist. He's a member of Veterans for Peace. He's a poet, and he's well known in the poetry community for third Thursdays of the month.
Third Thursday Poetry Night at the Social Justice Center.
We'll get to talk about that shortly. Could we start talking a little bit about how you really got involved in activism? I know you were on 3 years ago, and we talked about this a little bit, but maybe you could just give us a little background about how you became an activist.
Okay, it goes way back, I think. After I graduated from high school, I went down to New York City to go to college at Fordham University, and that was in 1964. So that was just at the Vietnam War was just beginning really to crank up, and the protests against the war were cranking up at the same time. And I didn't know too much about it. I'd heard a little bit about it while I was in high school reading the papers, but once I got down there, I became educated by talking to folks, and I got involved with the different groups that were forming at the time. It was also the time of the Civil Rights Movement, and I remember there was a debate on campus whether we should, our campus group be affiliated with either SNCC or CORE, and I can't remember which way it went eventually, but I do recall being in some kind of a civil rights march where we marched through Harlem. And you know, I'm this white kid from upstate New York down in New York City walking through Harlem. I was thrilled. I thought it was great. People were hanging out the windows and waving. But the Vietnam War was what really galvanized me then. And then I just stayed active. I became a member of SDS, and I didn't get to any of the big demonstrations. I went to a couple in New York City. In fact, I remember Allen Ginsberg walking about 3 rows behind me in New York City. Great American poet.
He was.
But I didn't get to Washington, D.C. or any of those. And I like to tell people the reason was I was a student and I had to work and stuff. So I couldn't do all that traveling to these places to go to these big demonstrations, but I read about them. And then I got drafted after I got out of school. And I continued being against the war then, against the war after that, and somehow the wars haven't stopped.
The wars haven't stopped. Well, could you talk a little bit about your activism while you were in the military?
Yeah, while I was there, I had made contacts with a couple different political groups, some of them more political than just anti-war, and I was also subscribing to a number of newspapers and journals before I was drafted, like The Guardian, I think, was one of them. Not The Guardian we have now, but it was a left-wing newspaper called The Guardian. Yeah, it was really good. I also got The Militant, which came out from, I think, the Socialist Worker Party, and maybe the newspaper from the Progressive Labor Party. So I was tied into a lot of these political groups. So they had contacts with a lot of their people in who were in the military. I wasn't the only one, you know. And then I would meet these guys and we would exchange literature and stuff. I wasn't involved in any overt political actions at the time. The only thing I do recall politically, because I just wanted to get through my 2 years and get out.
Right.
That's all. I was marking time, as they say. But I do remember when Kent State happened, and we had a gathering in our company, and our commander just threw this out as a discussion item. And so immediately my hand went up. And I went up and I spoke out against the students being shot. And I sat down, and then of course he went up one side of me and down the other, you know, saying how they were right, they were threatening all this stuff, just shooting me down as far as arguments go. But I said my piece, and there were some younger, so I was a college graduate at that point, so there were some younger recruits in my training class, and one of them from some rural place in America turned to me and said, "I didn't know people could have ideas like that."
I'm sure you educated a few people that day.
I think I woke them up a little bit. I don't know what happened after that.
Well, what kind of lessons did you learn from activism during the Vietnam War? How did you...
Well, I don't know if I learned And at the time, what I was aware of was that just continuing to do this. And there were, of course, constant discussions, and of course the usual factualism that we get in politics about tactics and how we should handle this and all that. But what I've learned afterwards by reading history and talking with historians about it was that the key to the ending the Vietnam War was actually all the demonstrations and the people out in the streets. It took a long time, but what it did, it gave the politicians, particularly the ones who were sort of sitting on the fence, they have to listen to their constituents. Well, you've got 1 million people in the streets, they better pay attention.
Right.
And so it gave them the courage to vote against the funding for the war, which is actually what ended the war. I mean, that's how the war actually ended in, 75 or whenever it was. So to me, that lesson is people on the street, they would say, oh, what good are your demonstrations? What good is it? They're loud, they're out there, and the media, even if they don't agree with us, pays attention.
They do.
So, and that's happening now. Look what happened the day after the inauguration. Look at that huge event. It was covered all day long by the major news organizations. CNN, that's all they did, broadcasted that day. And if you didn't know about it, you weren't paying attention. You were in a coma or something.
Right.
You know?
Right. All right. Are you opposed to all wars, or have there been any wars you weren't opposed to?
I don't. That's an interesting question. I'm not a pacifist. I don't consider myself a pacifist. I think that if we were invaded, I live in Albany, and if the tanks were rolling down the streets of Albany, I'd be out there like the French resistance with a Molotov cocktail fighting the tanks. But these wars of state, these state entities the issues are usually not what they put them out to be. And I mean, even in World War II, we didn't go to Germany to fight the Nazis. The United States got into that war when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. And then when we declared war on Japan, Japan's ally was Germany, and then they declared war on us. So, while fighting fascism, to me, that would have been a noble cause. And to answer that quickly, maybe the Spanish Civil War would have been something I would have believed in, or at that time. But nowadays, I think it's gone way beyond that, where you're dealing with powers and entities. There's some of them, like corporations and stuff, aren't even political entities that are waging the war. The governments are, and who gets killed in the wars these days? Well, civilians always were getting killed, but it's more so now. So I guess I'd have to say, at this point in history, I don't think there's a war out there that I'd like.
Good answer, Dan. Well, let's talk a little bit about Veterans for Peace.
Okay.
When did you get involved with them, and what kind of work are you doing with them now?
Well, that was very interesting. I didn't know about. It was soon after they were formed in the mid '80s. There were some versions of Veterans for Peace existed since the Vietnam War that I know of, but I think it was in the mid '80s they actually formed the organization as we know it today. And I was informed of it when I wrote a letter to the editor that got published in the Times-Union on a anti-war issue, and I got a phone call from a local member of Veterans for Peace named Bill Crapser, who actually wrote one of the best accounts of a soldier being in Vietnam that I can remember. It's called Remains. I don't know whether it's still in print, but Remains by William Crapser. If you can find it, go get it. It's a really good book. He called me up, and he said to me, because I said in my letter that I was a veteran. He said, do you know about Veterans for Peace? So I immediately looked it up, immediately joined them. There was a local chapter. That's how I met Frank Hood. And eventually met John Amadon through that too. I don't think it was right at that time, but soon after.
Ed Block.
Ed Block, definitely Ed Block, one of the heroes.
Yeah.
It's just the great thing about Veterans for Peace, especially now, is they've expanded their mission. Their idea is that you can't have peace abroad if we don't have peace at home.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've expanded their vision and their mission to all the social justice issues. So a lot of Veterans for Peace guys, I'm using that term as a generic term, and it's also women involved too. But they were out in Ferguson during the riots there. They were there to support the black community, and they were there at Standing Rock. Wonderful photographs of people on horses carrying their big Veterans for Peace flags.
That was.
Yeah.
So they've really maintained a lot of their position that they had way back in 85.
Oh yeah, it's definitely an anti-war.
It's
Is to continue to fight militarism. We're not against the military people. We're against militarism and the use of military force to take over other countries. That's a good point. I should mention our newspaper. The Veterans for Peace newspaper is called Peace in Our Times, and it comes out 4 times a year. And if you go to theveteransforpeace.org, you'll find a way that you can subscribe to this newspaper, and it lists stories, and all the stories are written by members of Veterans for Peace. And so that it's an excellent source of information about what we're doing out there.
A lot of good articles.
Yeah, and there's some poetry in there too.
Well, not a week goes by in the Capital Region, I think, without you being out vigiling somewhere. And
when I'm in town, I like to get to the beach sometimes in the summer.
Yeah. Why do you do that? And do you think you'll continue to do it?
Oh, I plan on continuing until as long as I can. In fact, I don't even have to stand. Some of the vigils we do in front of the Capitol, the elderly Quaker women like Pat Beadle and Sue Clark, we got chairs for them now, so they can be there for 45 minutes. So,
glad to hear
so
that.
if I need a chair, I hope to be bringing a chair to these. But I'll tell you why we're doing it. It's not just me. I think it's why, Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace and all the other organizations are doing this. A couple months ago, I was out there in Del Mar at the traffic light, and a woman pulled up in an SUV, young mother, bunch of kids in the back. Her window comes down while she's waiting for the light, and she leans over and she says, "I see you people here every week. You give me hope." So I think that's why I'm doing it, because I'm giving hope to these people who are taking their kids to picking them up after soccer, picking them up after ballet class, going home and making dinner, all the things that the ordinary people are doing in their lives. I have the time and the wherewithal to get out there, as do many of the other people that join us. And I think that's why we're doing it for all those other people that can't stand there.
Yes, good point. Every year, at least a couple times a year, for either the Veterans Day Parade, I guess, and the Memorial Day Parade, you organize the Veterans for Peace contingent.
Yep.
Could you describe that, and what kind of a reception do you get from the crowd?
Well, I'm very glad to do that each year. And it occurred to me not long ago, when I was a kid here in Del Mar, my father was in the American Legion Post, Blanchard Post, I think it's called, out here in Del Mar. And my mother was in the auxiliary. And my sister and I were 5 or 6 years old, and we would march in the parade. She made little crepe paper hats for us, and we would march in the parade then. And it must have been something deep in my psyche that made me think of that. But I thought that Veterans for Peace is a veterans organization. Why shouldn't we march in these parades along with the traditional veterans organizations? And we've been doing it now for many years, going back to the Kosovo thing. And we get a great reception from people, and they're glad to see us. And our ragtag friends from the larger peace community that march with us. It's always very gratifying to be there and have people cheering us. And we're veterans too, so we should be there.
I'm so glad you are. I think a lot of people really appreciate that.
Okay, good. I think so.
Let's talk a little bit about Donald Trump. Things have changed a little bit since the inauguration, and there's more activists now.
Yes.
And there's many more issues as well.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on Donald Trump? Do you think that this is the direction our country is going to go now? Are we becoming more right-wing? Are we Are we going to have more wars? What are your thoughts on Donald Trump?
Well, I think it's ironic. Donald Trump is ironic in the sense that he has engendered a much greater spirit of activism in our country. The day after the inauguration, there was one of the hugest gatherings of people, mostly women. It was organized by women in Washington, D.C., and all over the country. There was not a single state in the United States that didn't have at least one sister march, even the smallest state. I think Oklahoma only had one march or something like that. But many other states had many sister marches in all their cities, and even not in the big city. I saw one in New Jersey, some town. I didn't even know the name of the town. And so people all over the country stood up, and they're still standing up. We can continue to see a upsurge of activism in this country. Organizations like Planned Parenthood and ACLU, their funding has increased tremendously for where it should have been all along. But as my grandmother would say, sometimes people need a good swift kick in the ass to get going. And I think that's what happened. And this is what America is. I was in the military supposedly to fight for our country. Well, to me, our country is people standing up and voicing their opinion and putting their feet on the street and telling the politicians and their neighbors, this is the vision I see for the world, and it's the way I want it. So that's what we're seeing now. And under Obama, things were quieter because people thought he was going to get something done. But even then, I was out there, and you were out there on the street. We needed to be there, no matter who is president or who's in Congress, or those people really don't run the country. We run the country if we can force them to do what we think is right.
Do you think this threat of nuclear war with North Korea is real, or do you think it's just the media getting people to read newspapers, and do you think Trump would really act on it?
It scares me to think that. It scares me to think. I don't know. One of the funny things I saw on Facebook a while back talked about, showed a picture of the leader of North Korea, and it talked about this crazy leader of the country with a funny haircut, and then they said Donald Trump. In many ways, these two people are cookie cutters of each other. I mean, they are both, to me, it seems they're unreasonable. I don't know. I can't go by the media. You also remember that Korea it's like Vietnam. It was this country that was divided for artificial reasons, and then it became two entities. And North Korea is a very tiny country that's undergone years and years of sanctions. I heard on the news the other day, Switzerland has volunteered to serve as an intermediary to work on talks between our two countries. That's the way it should go.
Yes.
Don't let these two crazy men, throw bombs at each other. Let's get the international community involved and take it out of the hands of the United States and out of the hands of North Korea.
Good. I want to move on to your poetry.
Okay.
You've only got about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
So you're the host of Third Thursday Poetry Night, and I wondered if maybe you'd read us a couple of your poems.
Okay.
And I will talk a little bit about it.
Okay. Well, I don't say usually write political poems. I write political poems when the need arises. But I think I'd like to start off with this poem. It's not a political poem, and this poem recently won third prize at the New York State Fair.
Oh,
nice.
nice.
Yeah. They have the best goat and the best heifer and the best melons and the best zucchini.
Yes, I knew about that.
Yeah. Well, they
have the best
best poems too. So
Wow.
I won third place with this. And what this poem does is I wrote it intentionally for the fair, and it takes all of the New York State symbols. We have state bird and state flower and all that. It takes all of those symbols, and I try and work them into the poem, including, I don't know if people out there know this, there's a New York State fossil. I don't remember the name of the fossil because it's one of those long technical names, but the title of the title of the poem has to do with the age in which the fossil was formed. This is called At the Solarian Cafe, Summer's Best in Show. We had dinner in that state of mind where the sun rises over Albany. The patio, rimmed by sugar maples, was lit by garnet party lights. The garden fragrant with lilac and rose bushes. Bluebirds in the branches. Ladybugs walking on the leaves, finding their own dinner. In the stream, a pile of sticks, a beaver's starter home, a snapping turtle in the mud. Over apple cider martinis, we perused the menu. Fresh caught stuffed brook trout, local greens, angler's fish stew with striped bass, bay scallops in butter, garlic, white wine. For dessert, fresh apples, muffins in cinnamon laced with milk as the sun sets in Buffalo.
Very nice.
Thank you. I don't know what won first prize. I don't know what it's like or anything, but I was surprised to win
Well,
even anything.
congratulations. Now, this third Thursday Poetry Night, can anyone join your organization?
No, it's no organization.
You
It's just an event.
It's just
Just an event. But they show up on the third Thursday, and the beauty about having it on a day of the month like that is that people don't have to know what the date is. They just have to look at the calendar and say first Thursday, second Thursday,
Yes.
third Thursday. And so you just have to show up at the Social Justice Center on 33 Central Avenue. 7:30 we start. There is always a featured poet, sometime mostly local or regional featured poets. I've had some nationally known poets in there too. And there's an open mic for everyone else. So bring your own poems and come and join us any third Thursday at the Social Justice Center, 7:30, 33 Central Avenue, Albany.
Now, people could join you even if they just wanted to listen to the poetry.
Oh yeah.
You wouldn't actually have to
No, I don't kick
have their
anybody.
own poem.
No. Walt Whitman said, great poets need great audiences.
Okay.
So we like having people there. And we ask for a small donation. Although if you got a $50 bill that's can't break anywhere because it's too much, we'll take it.
You take it.
But the money goes to, we pay the poet, that's the featured poet. We also support the local poetry events in the area and the work of the Social Justice Center. So it's every third Thursday, Social Justice Center.
Okay. Well, why don't you read us another poem
I'm
or
going to
two?
do a political one.
All
How's
right.
that? So we were talking about Donald Trump, and shortly after the election, I got an idea for this series of poems about, the overall title is What Makes America Great. And what these are all true stories. Either something that happened to me, or in a couple instances a story that somebody told them, or the one I'm going to read you is an article from the Times-Union. So these are true stories, because I don't think we need to make America great. I think America is great, and it's because of the people.
Yeah.
And so that's what all these poems are really about people just being people in America in the era of Trump. So this is What Makes America Great, number 26. Oh, by the way, they're numbered at random, so I don't think I have 26 of them. I have a number 102 is one of them, but I just number them by random. So What Makes America Great, number 26. And this is from an Albany Times-Union article in March, and this is for Mustafa and Bahar Turunik at the Chipmunk Cafe, which is up in Schenectady someplace. It's a true story. This is the way it was in the newspaper.
Okay.
A young couple emigrate from Turkey, both successful business professionals, Muslims to America to open a cafe in the mall in the Trump era. They are happy making sandwiches, espresso, Turkish coffee 7 days a week. When bad things happen to Muslims elsewhere in America, people say to them, "Don't worry, this is not the America we know. We love you. We believe that everything is going to be okay for you and your son."
I love that one.
That's what makes America great, you know?
is.
I mean, just ordinary
is.
people doing their job, and then their customers appreciating them, and whether they're a Muslim or they're Jewish or they're Protestant, nobody really cares. They just like the coffee.
So you get your inspiration to write from just everyday events.
Everything, the world around me.
How many poems would you say you've written?
I don't know.
A lot.
Hundreds.
A lot.
Hundreds. There's hundreds out there, and
So-
some of which are stuck in. I was going through a folder the other day looking for something to bring to an open mic, and there were poems in there. I said, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that poem. I read that in a long time. I'd take it out and read it." So yeah, I got hundreds and hundreds, and mostly just from what's happening around me, the world around me, which includes politics, but includes other things.
One of the books that we've got here is Post-Traumatic Press,
Oh, yeah.
2007, and more or less about combat type issues, right?
Well, not all the poems. No, this was published. That's the name of the press down in Woodstock, Post-Traumatic Press.
Okay,
It's run by Dale Weiss,
okay.
who's an excellent poet, and his wife Allison Koffler is also an excellent
Oh,
poet.
right, and he's a Vietnam veteran.
And he's a
isn't he? Now I
Vietnam veteran.
remember.
Yep. And oh yeah, let me just say this, so the audience knows. I was not a combat veteran in Vietnam. I was drafted. I was trained as a tank driver, but I was in the lucky half of my training class, and I spent my time at Fort Knox and didn't go to Vietnam. So, but Dale is a Vietnam combat vet. Actually has a Purple Heart. He's got a bad leg from a wound. And he publishes poetry and not just about military stuff, about anything. In fact, the poems I have in there, I don't think the poems in there are military poems, or maybe one of them is.
Okay. Well, I think we've got about 3 minutes left, so would you like
want
to
a
read
quickie?
another one?
All right, I got a
It
quickie.
wouldn't have to be a quickie.
No, most of my poems are under 3 minutes. I'm going to read this one because this is
We do. We have just 3 minutes.
okay.
So.
Good. This I can do. I go to Chatham most Saturdays to go to the Peace Vigil there, and I wasn't there one day, and this thing happened to one of the couples, Bill and Bernadette, that also go there. And this happened to them, and they told me the story, so I wrote a poem about it. So this is What Makes America Great, number 20. It is raining on the town park for the weekly Peace Vigil. A gray-haired couple huddle under one umbrella with signs for peace and justice in the Trump era. A pickup truck pulls up and stops. The window rolls down. What is the driver going to say? Here, you will need this, the driver says, hands them an umbrella, and drives off. Again,
Another great poem.
just ordinary people going about ordinary lives, interacting and helping each other. That's what makes America great.
It is. So, you'll keep writing poems.
Hope so.
You'll keep vigiling.
Yep, till they throw dirt on me.
And what advice do you have for other people who might be watching today who think, gee, I'd like to get involved. Maybe I'd like to write a poem, or maybe I'd like to vigil. What do you suggest?
I would suggest pick something. You must have an issue, one thing that you want to do and that you think needs to be done. And you don't have to be out there every week like I do. If you can only do something one day a month, fine. We don't stuff envelopes much anymore. But as a metaphor, you can stuff envelopes, you can find something to do. So don't overwhelm yourself and get burnt out. Pick the one thing and just do it.
Good advice. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. This
Oh.
was such a pleasure.
Oh, for me too, Trudy. I enjoyed it very much, and thanks for asking me to read poems.
Oh, good. And thank you all for joining us. And I'd like to thank Janice Irwin, who produces this show and does a wonderful job every time.
Bring them home, bring them home, bring our parents, our children home, from the dust of Afghanistan back to our arms, bring them home.
Bring them home, bring them home, bring our sons